The Friends of the Library are thrilled to invite you to our first adult program. The Friends of the Library has been in existence for about 6 months now. This is our first program for adults. We have tried to do a lot for the children's programs over the summer, and now we're anxious to get some things rolling for the adults in town. I think we feel very strongly that the library is central to a community, and we want to put forth our efforts to have the library offer as much as possible to the town of Wilmington. One major thing that we've got tonight is the first exhibition of the bond papers are in the Bicentennial Room. I hope you'll take some time and go look at those. Those are the papers that were lost for so many years and have been bought back by the town recently. We're privileged to have those tonight for the first time. I'd like to ask everyone to notice that we have a membership table outside. If you would like to join the Friends of the Library, if you don't have any time, that's all right. We'll put your contributions to good work. There's a lot of things we can do physically for the library, as well as having the programs. We'll be having a book sale next summer to also raise money for the library. And if you do have some time, we have a lot of fun committees. The hospitality committee has baked all the apple pies for tonight. If you'd like to do something like that, then jot down your name, and I think we've all found that the friends are becoming friends and having a lot of fun. I'd like to thank especially Sandra Curtin for being here tonight and the staff of WCTV for taping this program for us. They've done a couple programs and they've always done a great job. I think it's important that we're recording this night because this is kind of historic for Wilmington, and it will be great to have this as permanent record for the town. I'd also like to give special thanks to Adele Passmore, who is up here and is probably going to stick a knife in me, but she has been really instrumental in setting up this program. She has envisioned the program, created it, produced it, and is now performing as well. So she was one of our friends that said that she was interested in helping support the library, but she didn't have any time to give, unfortunately. So anybody that has no time, we especially encourage you to become friends of the library. The show tonight will be in two parts. First, we'll have a panel discussion, and the panel will be sharing their recollections and reminiscences of Wilmington. And then we'll open up the discussion to people from the audience. Because we are taping, we would ask anybody that would like to ask a question or share their own reminiscences to come up to this mic over here in the middle of the room. That way we can capture your segment as well. I hope that's not too intimidating for people. If I can be here, so can anybody else, I think. And then after that, we'll have the Baldwin apple pie. So welcome to Times Gone By and Apple Pie, and I hope you enjoy the program. First, we'll have Carolyn Sullivan-Harris. She is our chairman of the Wilmington Historical Commission. She's hosting our program tonight. She has been instrumental in getting the bond papers for us, and she has she's a perfect person to lead our program tonight. I'd like to welcome her and the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Karen. I would like to, first of all, on behalf of the Historical Commission, thank Karen Campbell and the Friends of the Library, Tina Stewart, and especially Adele Passmore for her foresight and hard work to organize this program tonight. We are really excited to have this panel and to be able to share their memories of Wilmington. This has been a goal of the Historical Commission. We've talked about it numerous times at our meetings. You know, history is day to day, and at one time you had to write everything down in your memoirs or diaries and so forth, and today, through the wonder of technology, we can do oral and video histories and have it for years and years to come. So we're really thrilled to be here this evening and to share with these outstanding members of Wilmington society, their memories of our town. What we would like to do is, if we could imagine sitting in a nice living room in front of a nice fireplace this afternoon with our cider and coffee and apple pie, and just sort of think about days gone by and share our memories. It's our hope that there are so many topics that, you know, perhaps that this will be the beginning of other programs of this nature in the future. I'd like to first introduce you all to the members of our panel this evening. Bill Dayton, if you could just sort of wave to everyone, Bill. Bill is a long resident of Wilmington. He's from Burlington Avenue and has always maintained a deep interest in all things that are Wilmington. We're delighted to have you here this evening. Ruth Childs. Ruth is the great-granddaughter of Asa Sheldon, of Wilmington, Asa Sheldon, a Wilmington farmer. Ruth's mother was the older sister of Marion Cole Connors. Do I have that right? No? No, it's not.
She was
Yeah.
my grandmother.
Your
Was-
grandmother.
Right, my grandmother was.
Sister.
And we're delighted to have you with us this evening. And Marjorie Connors Kennedy is the daughter of Marion Cole Connors.
Right.
Okay, and who recently passed away at 105.
Six.
106.
We buried her on 106th birthday.
Isn't that's amazing? Wow. Well, you also grew up in the Reverend Isaac Morrill home.
That's right.
On Middlesex Ave.
Yes.
So we're delighted to have you with us. Dr. Ann Bazell is the granddaughter of Dr. Daniel Bazell, whom the Bazell School and Senior Center was named after, and also a daughter of attorney Philip Bazell. And Adele Passmore, what can we say about Adele here? Is a co-author of our Wilmington Bicentennial book. Adele has a love of everything that's Wilmington, and can be seen through her hard work over the years in preserving Wilmington's history. She's very active in the community, and the chief architect of this evening. Gerry O'Reilly is a lifelong resident of Wilmington and author of Wilmington, a Retrospective, and the pictorial of Silver Lake, which both were published within the past few years. And he's done a wonderful job, and he's going to be sharing some of his thoughts on Silver Lake this evening with us. Gertrude Butters Condry, senior member of the Butters clan. The Butters family goes back in Wilmington's history 11 generations, 300 years. Gertrude was also the editor of the Alpha in 1925, which is the high school Alpha, which was a newspaper that was published with Town News.
School and Town
News. And Helen Carter Blake. Helen is 90 years young. What memories of Wilmington we have here. She's lived in Wilmington all of your life, or most of your life, all of your life. Helen was a substitute teacher in every grammar school in town. So the stories that she has. And has been very active in numerous community organizations. And Jim Durkee is not only a lifelong resident, but so also were his father and his grandfather before him. And he hails from North Wilmington, and his area of expertise is North Wilmington. So we'll be hearing stories of North Wilmington this evening. We have, again, I'd like to thank you all for being with us tonight. We have so many topics that we could deal with in terms of Wilmington history, and I'm just going to run down some of the topics that we'd like to cover this evening. The Grange Hall, the old theater on Main Street, the Silver Lake itself, the city people and Thompson's Grove and the Roaring Twenties, the Depression, Harriman's Tannery, the Second World War, what was like on the home front in Wilmington during that time, George Spanos and his restaurant, the rebirth of Silver Lake after World War II, and what life was like in the 50s here in Wilmington. But we thought that our first topic would be simply to ask everyone on the panel, what were their earliest memories of Wilmington? What was it like here for you growing up in your home and school, entertainment? The Roberts family, I understand, had a lot of activities in town for children to participate. The Roberts family were the owners of our Apollo Chocolate Company, and I guess they were really well-to-do and anxious to give something back to the community, and invited lots and lots of people to enjoy their homes. So I'm going to turn it over to the true experts here, our true historians, and I'm going to start with, I think we'll start over here with Bill, if you wouldn't mind.
No.
Okay.
Well, you know, I've been around Wilmington 77 years, and I was born on the Brooks Farm up on Burlington Avenue, where Marion Whitney lives now. And those days when I was growing up, that was Burlington Avenue, was only tarred as far as Boutwell Street. So we lived on a dirt road for quite a long while. And no buses, we walked to school, no matter what kind the weather was, and down to the Walker School. And I don't know, I guess I've lived about in every house on Burlington Avenue.
Right, and Dell Drive was your farm. The Dell
Dell Drive was on my grandmother's farm.
right on the farm. And
I'd be a millionaire today if I bought that place.
right, Bill. Right.
Do you remember the Roberts?
Oh, yes, yes. My uncle worked down there as a handyman, and I used to help him, and I'd get paid 10 cents an hour, even during the Depression.
Wow.
And, you know, there was a lot of painting to go on and everything else. And I just dug out some snapshots that I took from the original barn. And you could see the trees weren't very high in those days. And, you know, there's a lot of stories about the Roberts. He planted all those trees what are left on Burlington Avenue so he could walk down in the shade.
Did he go into Boston on the train?
Yes. Yeah.
So all along on Burlington Avenue,
Yeah,
the trees.
those maple trees. They're pretty well gone now, and he built the sidewalks too, up as far as Boutwell Street.
Right. He moved several houses around and lived in.
Yes, I lived in the one beside the brook, which is where Fred Fosgate lives now. And then we lived in the apartment house after I got back from the service.
Is that at the entrance to Roberts Road?
No, that's the one opposite Boutwell Street.
Okay.
They're just starting to paint that yellow. It's always been white.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you very much. Ruth?
Well, I started out on Clark Street, and then my father was killed at a fire. And from there, we went to live with my grandparents over in East Wilmington, what they call East Wilmington, and it's now Lucie's Market. I remember going up to the blacksmith shop, which was on the corner by where Textron is, and Herb Barrows had a big farmhouse there. My grandfather, Carter, on my mother's side, worked for him. And he used to come up from the work if he'd been in Reading, stop the wagon, and he would take me over to the barn and we'd put the horses away. Then I also remember on Sunday mornings going down to Eli's store. It was John Eli's father's store, where the Mobile station is now. And we would pick up the Sunday paper, and then we would walk home. And I started school over, it's now the Legion Hall, I believe, behind the little Chinese restaurant.
Off Lowell Street.
Off Lowell Street. And I went there until the 5th grade. I came over to the center school. The 6th grade was at the center school. And the first year I went into Bazell School, it was brand new. And then from there, I went to the old high school, graduated in 1941, and that tells my age. And from there, let's see, church, I remember the Roberts estate because Mrs. Roberts always had charge of setting up the booths at the Wilmington Methodist Church. And the ladies did what she said. And they would have like different countries for different booths. And also every year in May, she would have a party at her house, and she would have a maypole dance. And we would have hoodsies and cookies and things, and it was really nice. So I think that's it.
Thank you. Marjorie?
Well, I came home from the hospital to Glen Road at the foot of Drury Lane, the home there, and my grandmother and grandfather, Samuel and Mary Cole, lived up the street, and the house is still there. It's the Davis where they sold the hens. My grandfather built that because the farmhouse across the street, which belonged to Otis Carter, was struck by lightning, and so they had to move across the street. And like Bill talking about a millionaire, my grandmother wanted my father to buy that home, and we would have had all that property that goes way down to Washington Avenue. But Daddy worked in Boston and went on the train, and it was too far to walk to the train, he said, and we did not have a car. So from there, I moved over to Middlesex Avenue and Clark Street on the corner, which is now the Brakey home. Mrs. Brakey lives there, and we rented because the house belonged to Chester Clark, who lived across the street on the opposite corner. And he owned that home on the corner, and the next one, I believe it's the Stone home. And when he passed away, he wouldn't sell just one home. So that's when we went up the street and bought the Reverend Isaac Morrill home. And my next door neighbor when I was a little girl was Helen Blake. And she lived next door to me, and Sidney Buck down the street used to have his horses get loose, and we would be petrified. They'd be running the neighborhood, big work horses. And as far as church, my mom and dad lived in the Congregational Church, and Mama had the cradle roll, and Daddy was president of the men's club, and he sang in he sang in the choir, but they had four people sang together, you know. Quartet, yes. And they used to practice at our home every week, and I was allowed to sit in there with them, except one night I started humming. So I was asked to leave, and I was never allowed back in again. And I went 5 years to the Walker School, and had Sybil Willis Weiberg as a teacher, and Miss Swain, one of the Swain sisters. And then from there I went to the center school and graduated from the old high school. And I'm not going to tell you the year. Oh, and Ruthie is my second cousin, because her grandmother and my mother were sisters. So Ruthie's mother, Olive, was my first cousin. I was the youngest of all the grandchildren. Mom was one of 7 girls.
I forgot to tell you, too. I was flower girl for Helen.
Yes.
Flower girl.
That's right.
So I guess that's it for now.
Some memories. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ann?
Well, first of all, it's interesting, the Bond collection has pictures of my old home, because from the age of 1, I lived in what was the Bond house up opposite the Cadwallader Ford house.
Some people may not know where that is, Ann. It's the intersection of Middlesex Avenue and Salem Street.
Yeah.
The big Victorian on the corner
Where
you're talking
Larry
about.
Doucette lives
Larry
now,
Doucette's.
with all the nice, whatchamacallums, irises, thank you.
The Iris Garden.
And that too was of interest. because it's where the Wilmington Women's Club had their first meeting, and what was then the front parlor, it was our dining room. And my grandmother attended the meeting, but she elected not to join. And I think one of the things perhaps that queered her on it was that Mrs. Bond's favorite song was Sweet Alice Ben Bolt, and I don't know if you know the words to it, but it would turn almost anyone off. And when we recently had what was it, the 90th or 95th anniversary of the founding of the Women's Club, we all got together and sang it as a chorus. And speaking of my earliest recollection, I remember crying when my mother was heading for the Women's Club, and I said that I needed her more than they did. And everyone laughed because she was at that time president, which was, so I was between 2 and 4 because she was president from 24 to 26. And I'm now the current president, being recycled for my second go-around. And I never would have thought that I would have anything to do with the Women's Club, but I enjoy it very much now. And well, we lived in that house, and I graduated from Wilmington High in 1940, and from that time on, as far as Wilmington is concerned, there isn't too much because I was away until my father died, and I came back in '78. So I would come for Christmas vacation and things like that, but at Christmas time, you know, the weather's not so hot, so you don't tour around very much. And when I was growing up, I knew more about North Wilmington because you didn't have all the motorized accessories that you had back then. When we wanted to get around, we had to ride our bikes. I would ride my bike over to high school, and it was we didn't have gears, and it was a pretty hard pump getting up around Federal Street. But we could get away with it because traffic wasn't what it is these days, wobbling bicycles, you know. So my recollections are mainly of the early days. Of course, when we come down to the Second World War, the gas and food rationing, what I remembered was when I'd come home for vacation, Mother would, first thing she'd say is, "Where's your ration book?" And the second one, "When do you have to go back?"
And do you remember any of games or things that you played with you had a sister, didn't you?
Yeah, oh yes, I still
Right.
do. Yes.
What did you do for fun?
Well, one thing that Mary and I and Jeannie McLeod did was we built a hut up in the Pine Grove that was then back of our house, because we owned all the land that went down to the railroad track at that time. That was before taxes got to be such. And
Actually, you live there now, too. You still live in that same
yes,
lot of land on the back end of it.
down near the tracks.
Right.
But we were competing with Jack Barrows and Wally Barrows and Gordon Coombs because they were building a hut. And Gene Coombs, of course, with his furniture business, he'd have a lot of things in crates and all. And so we went down and asked if we could have the crates. And Gordon hadn't thought that he had to ask, you know, so we got some of the building supplies out from under. But they got some better timber from, I guess it was from the tannery. But our thing wasn't too strong, and we had to sort of tie the wall up to one of the pine trees so it wouldn't fall over. But I had sliding windows. I was rather proud of that. They didn't have such a refinement. But that's the chief thing. Some of the chief things that I recall.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Yes.
Should we go to Gerry?
Gerry O'Reilly. I think I have to talk about growing up in the town. I have to talk about Silver Lake. And and how I got there. My mother was Irish. She came from Ireland. My father came from Newfoundland and Nova Scotia. And when they came to America, they lived in East Boston and summered at Silver Lake. The city people came. I was born in a small house up there. Front door was in Tewksbury and the back door was in Wilmington. But if you looked on a map, you'd understand what the locality is. If you drew a circle around Silver Lake, it encompasses South Tewksbury, and all of the people up there, they didn't come from Wilmington in the south or Tewksbury in the north, they came from Silver Lake. And I was in school. About 2 weeks before I'd get out of school, my mother would buy me a brand new pair of sneakers, and I could really run in them fast as anything. School would get out, and she'd say, put them away, need them for when you go back to school. I'd go barefoot the rest of the summer, as would everyone else at Silver Lake. 2 days later, the city people arrived. Wilmington welcomed Charlestown to Silver Lake, and the population of the lake tripled in one day. Everyone just arrived, and they arrived by Eastern Mass bus, by train. Any way they could get there, they arrived. They got there. They carried a pillowcase filled with clothes to wear and bedclothes and a box of food for one day. And the people who lived across the street from me directly were the Hurleys from Somerville. There were 8 of them, and the Gilberts were down the street, and there were 5 Gilberts. And the first thing they did when they arrived, went outside and swept out the outhouse. Get the leaves out of it and the cobwebs, throw a cup full of lime down it, and drop down a piece of paper, all set to go. They would then come across to my house and get a bucket of water, bring it home and prime the pump and start the fire going. And a lot of the houses, every house up there had an outhouse. Some of them had in-house outhouses. And I think the city people, we call them camps, and the city people call them cottages, the cottage at the lake. And I have a friend of mine, George Hughes, and his house was typical. There was 6 rooms in the house, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, dining room, and a front porch screened in. And he'd talk about weekends with 40 people living in the house. And he lived in Mystic Ave in South Tewksbury. Mystic Ave comes down, almost down to the lake. It's Mystic Ave, Lakeview, and Willow Street. And they all pretty much run down to the lake. I like to take a walk around the lake with you. As soon as the people arrived, everyone went down the lake. If you think the beach is crowded on days like in the hot days in the summertime, every beach was crowded. The whole lake was filled with people. From 10 o'clock in the morning until 12 o'clock at night, there was people swimming. And the first beach was on Lake Street was Mells's, private beach. You couldn't go there unless you were a friend of the Mells's. I never had a problem. I was always allowed to swim there. The next beach up the end of Fitz Terrace was Skylark Beach, and was called that because it was a boathouse at the end, right on the lake, and it was a day camp for more kids from up from the city. The next beach down at the end of Pond Street, which is the paper street now, is called Bloodsucker. And some parents didn't want their kids to go there. Obvious. There was a danger of get sucked up with the blood. Further on down at the corner at the John Fulton Park was Danger Beach. Danger Beach was called that because of the remnants of the old ice house that filled the beach was still there. There was a foundation wall that was about 10 feet out in the water, ran almost the entire length of what the beach is today. And the pilings is still in the water. And I got a letter recently from Joe Dunham, a teacher that I had in high school, and he said that he remembers an old car being pulled out of Danger Beach, and I guess people were hurt there, so that's how they got the name. The next beach was on Grove Avenue, was Moxie Beach, and it was named after that because of a sign that was painted on a 3-story hotel that was right on the lake. I guess that building burnt down in the 20s. I don't remember it, but it was replaced by a 1-story building, which also had a Moxie sign painted on the side so you could see it from Grove Avenue. And that was painted out in 1943, probably because the Germans might bomb Wilmington, and they didn't want to pinpoint something. And then you went down, further down Grove Avenue, came to Baby Beach. Cool teenagers didn't go to Baby because it was Baby Beach. And generally, people went swimming in the lake. Get there at 10 o'clock, the whole lake would just fill up all one time, and it stayed till about 4 o'clock, and then everyone would go home. 7 o'clock, fathers come down with the whole family, and everyone got a bath, got the hair washed, bodies washed completely. The whole lake was foam. And then when the mosquitoes come out, they all left again. And I was talking to a woman, Bill Fabiano's mother, Helena, and she's 86 years old, and I said, what's your favorite memory of Silver Lake? And she says, looked at me and smiled and said, swimming at midnight. and I think I understand that, because some of my best memories were swimming in the lake at night. And I can recall one time that a bunch of us went down to Melz's Field, stripped, and went into the water at Skylark. And we're out there enjoying it, but not making any noise. We'd be quiet. Then we hear giggles. Oh, geez. And look around, and you see a couple heads over in the water. And who are you? And we don't say anything. Then you look further, and you see couples sitting on the shore. And you say, oh, how are we going to get out of here now? So we go up on the, and come up to, like a frog, going, you can see your eyes. Then you make a mad dash for your clothes and put them on. And then we'd get dressed and go back and go over to Jack's Lunch. And we'd walk by the people and say, we knew you were there all along.
Where was Jack's Lunch?
Jack's Lunch, there were two Jack's Lunch. There was Jack's, the original was on corner of Wild and Grove Avenue, and that burnt down in the 40s. It was replaced by another building right on Grove Avenue, right across the street from where the beach is now. And comparison, the buildings that are on Pond Street were inside now, that are there now, were inside the foundation of the ice house. And I went to the Lake School. The foundation was a red brick foundation, went all the way out to Grove Avenue and then back in again. And there were still fires in the sawdust that was underground there. Places to eat. You went to the Saturday afternoons, everyone went to the Rainbow. It was the family restaurant. Walk in, you get clams and Italian food. Sunday afternoon, the same people went across the street to Rocco's to get pizza. There was also the Pines in Tewksbury and the Oaks in the Hilltop. And I think you have to connect South Tewksbury and Silver Lake was all just one big family unit. The people who lived in my neighborhood were primarily Newfoundland, Nova Scotian people, and my parents knew them all. Although my parents are immigrants, they knew all these people. And the woman who lived next door to me was my father's babysitter back in Placentia. So that's how
Back where?
Placentia, Newfoundland. And that's how tight the neighborhood was. And the city people made it, though. You couldn't believe when all of these city people come up to Wilmington. Silver Lake became Charlestown. And it was swinging times. Thompson's Grove would have 2 or 3 carnivals a year. There would be carnivals at Foster's Corner. That's at the corner of South Street in Maine, where the South Tewksbury Fire Department is now. There was always something going on at the Silver Lake Betterment. There was always something going on at the South Tewksbury Betterment. There was always something going on at St. Mary's Church. The people who were there just rotated around. There was something going on every night. There was never, in my growing up at the lake, there was never a boring day. There was always something to do. And I like to give credit to when I was growing up, there were no male role models. The men all worked. When the war came on, they all just disappeared. But there were an awful lot of strong women. They built St. William's Church and they built St. Dorothy's, and I think they had a hand in the building the South Tewksbury Methodist Church. These women were strong. And I think also there was a chapter of the Aids to Victory was met in the Betterment. And I don't think I could talk for days upon days about Silver Lake. So I think that It was a free-spirited time. It was good times, and a lot of bad stories. One of the bad stories that I can attest to was the Black Cat Blue Terrace, which was a nightclub north of Boston. There were only two of them around here, Lavage's in North Reading and Blue Terrace. And Blue Terrace, I remember it, was a beautiful ballroom. And a little known fact is that Frankie Fontaine was the MC house comedian. And it was pretty good. It wasn't as bad as people would like to talk about it. I think the bad times came with, in my eyes, with booze, is when all the 17 and 18-year-olds came back from World War II and had been drinking for 2 and 3 years, and they just never stopped. I go on for Silver Lake, but, Silver Lake was Charlestown, and it's still a nice place to go to, and I hope that in the future that the town works awful hard to clean it back up again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gerry. Gertrude?
Yes. Jerry's a hard act to follow. I go back a couple of generations before Gerry. And in the early 1900s, life was a lot different than it is today. We had no electricity in our house, and most people didn't. We would sit around a table with a kerosene lamp in the middle, everybody sharing one light. We'd play games or talk, and there'd be children and adults all together, and it was all nice and friendly. We had a lot of snow. There was always snow in the winter. And the streets were plowed by a horse-drawn plow, so they were not very well done. And you could always have a sleigh ride. We could plan in October to have a sleigh ride and be sure that there'd be snow in January. And somebody in town had a great big long sled, and I don't know what it was called. I wanted to call it a double runner, but those are skates. But this sled had 2 or 3 sets of runners on it, and a half a dozen people could sit on it at one time. And we used to start at the bridge in the center of town and slide across town down to the fire station without any traffic in our way, because cars were all put up the 1st of January and didn't come out until April. So we could ski and slide all the time.
Sounds like a bobsled, Gertrude. You think it was a bobsled?
I don't think so.
Okay, it didn't have a steering wheel in the front?
No, it was pretty primitive, but it was a lot of fun. Because houses were heated by coal or coke. And
excuse me, where did you live then? Where were you living then?
Middlesex Avenue.
Middlesex?
Mm-hmm. That's where I was born, and I've lived most of my life there.
My body is.
Yeah, my brother said
Across
that.
from Rotary Park.
Yes.
Right.
My brother
On
lives
Middlesex.
there now. Mm-hmm. The trucks would come with coal or coke and a big chute, put it through a cellar window into a bin in the cellar, and then it would be shoveled into the furnace. And you don't do that nowadays. One thing that I remember, which was a little later, was when the telephones first came to town. The telephone exchange was in a house at the foot of the hill, near where the post office is now, in the Kinsman House. And we'd have numbers like 4-3 ring 1, 4-3 ring 2, 4-3 ring 3, and there'd be 3 or 4 people on the line. If it rang 3 times, and your number was 4-3 ring 3, that was your call, and you could answer the phone. And the lines were always open, so anybody else on the line could just pick up the phone and listen in. Nothing was private in those days. Another thing that I remember was there was a diner in town, and you could go and knock on the window, and Mr. Hamilton would reach out, and you'd order an ice cream cone, and you'd get about a pint of ice cream in a cone, and he'd charge you a nickel. Those were the good old days, And Walker School, when Helen and I were there, had the first and second grade were in one room, and the third and fourth in one grade, and the fifth had a single room upstairs, and the sixth did. And the Eames, Mildred and Gertrude Eames taught the early grades, and Henrietta Swain taught the fifth, and Miss Shaw taught the sixth. Then we went to the center school where Caroline Swain was the teacher. The center school is gone now. That was torn down. It's a parking lot for the high school. And then into the high school. And,
The old brick one.
It's the Swain School now. And those two Swains, that's why it was named the Swain School, I think. And I don't know, there was a lot of fun in those days. We had streetcars also. And I think one route went up Church Street, up to Nichols Corner. And that's where the Nichols Funeral Home is now. But the thing I remember about them is in the summer they'd have open cars. And my mother had a friend in Billerica, and the cars would go in back of the station through the woods all the way to Billerica. And my mother would take me when she went to visit. And I loved it when the branches and the leaves would come in and brush us in the seats. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. We had a lot of fun, not much to do with, but we enjoyed it all. It really was a lot of fun. I'll leave the rest to Helen.
I didn't have anything written out. I thought I was just going to sit in the front seat and enjoy everything. I was born on Church Street, where Margie Connor lives now. And I lived there till I was 7 years old, and then my father wanted to buy a house, so we went down to Middlesex Avenue, and I lived there for many, many years. Margie was one of my neighbors, and I went to the school, graduated from the little brick one over there, and one thing I remember when I was growing up, my father took me up to Silver Lake. We weren't supposed to go there because people came from Charlestown, and you just didn't go there.
I wasn't going to say that.
And years later, when I went in to trade in Jordans, because I had two boys, they would say, "Do you live near Silver Lake?" And I'd say, "Oh, no." The rainbow of Silver Lake had nothing to do with it. But anyway, I'll go back. I went with my father, and they cut ice. And at that time, they used to supply the ice for the Boston Ice Company. And he let me ride out on those great big floes in the middle of the water and mark it into squares and then put it in the incline, like, I guess, and into the house. And I thought it was wonderful. But when I got home, I found it was different. My mother didn't like my father one bit. So that was one thing I'll never forget, was cutting the ice. Then I graduated from high school and I went to Salem Normal. It used to be Salem Normal, then now it's Salem State, and you get a degree. But I didn't get a degree. But I was a substitute for 25 years. I used to say you have to have common sense too, as well as a degree. I can remember when I would walk up to Whitfield School in North Wilmington, and you never knew whether you ought to keep the windows closed because the smell from the tannery was awful, and so was inside. So you had to debate which you liked the best. I don't think there's anything else I have to say. I just had a wonderful life here in Wilmington with wonderful friends, and as I've got so old now, they look after me. So I'm very happy. Thank you.
That's great, thank you.
Jim?
I guess my earliest memories of Wilmington are probably in well, actually, all of my memories are primarily of North Wilmington. My earliest memory would be living in a house across from Frank Hathaway's and being taken care of by his granddaughter, Joan Webster.
I remember them.
Yeah. They were very kind to us, and we lived in one of the houses, one of the 4 or 5 houses which my grandfather owned. But for some reason, which I am not aware of, we moved up the street on Andover Street across from the Browns Crossing pumping station. And there we lived next to where Adele Passmore lives now.
Browns Crossing. Browns Crossing.
Browns Crossing, right. We had a great time. We could, as children, we could play most anywhere we wanted to. We always considered ourselves living in a rural community, which in fact it was. And certainly up our way there were farms, including where the Herndon Tavern is now. We called that the farm. There were other farms up on Andover Street, Daly's Farm, Schrapper's Farm, etc. As we got older, we could go to these farms and get paid 25 cents an hour, 50 cents an hour sometimes. When things really got going, we could get up to 50 cents an hour working up there. But before that, we explored greatly the woods and the valleys and the brooks and the ponds. Many times we would walk down the Boston and Maine Lowell to Salem tracks until we got to the bridge over Martin's Brook. We would sit on the bridge because we knew no trains were going to be coming. Almost, I only remember one train later in my life going along those tracks, and at that time, when my very earliest years, there were a couple of freight trains once in a while that went by, but that was it. You never had to worry about the trains, so you walked down the tracks, hopped on the bridge and fished. Got eels once in a while, got hornpout now and then. The other places that we explored, and we did some exploring, played cowboys and Indians, etc. We went to Devil's Den to explore Devil's Den off Andover Street. We slid on sleds on a hill which was about 500 feet or more south of Devil's Den. It was a great place to slide. There were not as many trees as there are today. And in fact, in back of Adele Passmore's house now, we used to visit an area which was purported to be an old Indian burying ground. I never found anything in that burying ground that would indicate that any Indian had ever been near the place. I did, however, find an excellent yellow jacket's nest. And which when I got home, my father said that he had counted approximately 200 stings in my body. That was a fun time, I'll tell you. We would play games in the fields across the street, which were part of the Browns Crossing area, pumping station area. We played football, We never did anything formally. These were strictly pickup games, I assure you. And there were no umpires. There were no referees. We played by the rules, but didn't get excited if we didn't win or didn't lose, or somebody lost, or somebody didn't make a home run, or somebody didn't make a touchdown. It was no big deal. We were doing it for the fun of it. On occasion, we would go down to the Harriman's Tannery field and play baseball or football there as well. Sometimes we went over to Caleb Harriman's house and played in football or baseball behind that house. Then, as we got a little, by this time we were in school. We went to Whitfield School primarily for the first 5 grades, Center School for 6th, as everyone else has mentioned, 7th and 8th grades in the Daniel T. Bazell School, and then went on to the high school. One of the things, I realize that's not the earliest memories, but in the high school I do remember at the beginning of the war, World War II that is, losing all of our teachers, a great many of our teachers, because they went into the service. I especially remember, one of the teachers I remember was Sylvia Nielsen, because she was an excellent teacher, in my opinion. She was an excellent teacher in ancient history and Latin. Now, if you can make second year Latin or ancient history interesting, you've got to be a pretty good teacher. And we really missed her. But as the other teachers went, so did she. She went to serve as well. We used to also sled and ski behind Frank Hathaway's house, which is the Herndon Tavern. At that time, it was surrounded by open fields. The ridge itself was covered with trees, but the fields below were all open, so that you came off the hill on a trail and had a large area to ski out into. And in fact, there was a pond in that big field between the ridge and Andover Street, Woburn Street, I'm sorry, where the cow used to wander around in there, and later on the cow would come home, we'd milk the cow. At the same time in the summertime, we would grow vegetables in the fields between the ridge and Woburn Street. We would then pick at harvest time, take root vegetables and put them in the root cellar behind the house, a large root cellar, so that we would have carrots, turnips, etc. during the winter time. The sledding and skiing were really quite good there. We had a lot more snow, it seems to me, than we've had here in the last few years. And in fact, the pumping station, once Don Foster became the superintendent of the water department, he put up a dam. Well, the dam was still there on Martins Brook, but he extended it so that the area behind the Browns Crossing station flooded, and the entire area was covered with water, which froze many times by Thanksgiving. Sometimes it took all the way until the middle of December to freeze hard enough to skate on, but it varied from year to year. We played hockey there. We did ice skating all over that area, including down the brook all the way to Martin's Pond in North Reading, with an occasional open spot where the water was running a little too fast and you came around a corner in a hurry and got a real surprise. As far as games, entertainment goes, we played Duck on the Rock, King of the Mountain, can't remember the rest of them.
Did you play Run, Sheep, Run?
Once in a great while. Once in a great while.
That is a run, sheep, run.
I made a note of a couple of them. Let's see what I said. Oh, Kick the Can, that was another one. Then when we got a little bit older, we started to play such things as Monopoly, etc. Go on from there. I guess everyone remembers the hurricane of 1938. That was an interesting year. We looked out the window. It was a tough storm. My mother said, "Don't go out." And being the wonderful child that I am, of course, I didn't go out. Then suddenly, this was several hours, the storm ended. And it was beautiful out. It was sunny. It was great. It was a beautiful day. So my father decided, let's go to Buck Brothers' store. I need something. We went down Woburn Street from the corner of Andover Street. We turned at Salem Street. We proceeded about 500 yards, perhaps, to the area of George Hathaway's house. At that point, the trees began to fall all around us. Apparently, we had been in the eye of the storm. We thought it was all over. There were no radio and certainly no television to tell you what was going on. At that point, the trees began to fall in front of us, and there were probably 15 trees came down while we sat there for a second. At that point, 15 trees came down behind us. Now we have a problem in the old Model A of how to get out of there. Well, to the right of us was a house. I have no idea who lives there at this point, but we drove across their lawn, down part of their driveway, across part of the neighbor's driveway, and past part of the cross of the neighbor's lawn, and finally came back out on Salem Street, and my father said, "I don't think we need anything at Buck Brothers' store." While I'm speaking of the 1938 hurricane, let me mention the, I believe it was 1937 Valentine's Day blizzard. Someone was mentioning the sleds and the horse-drawn sleighs. Well, I believe it was that storm when the roads, at least in our area, were packed by using a pung, a horse with a pung. And that's a large sled with weights on it, and it just pushed the snow down, packed the snow down flat so that vehicles could travel over it. Well, there weren't many vehicles traveling anyway, so it didn't really matter much. The snow at our house was to the first level of the roof. It had drifted. It wasn't because it was such a huge storm as far as depth goes, but the blowing, the blizzard area drifted the snow to the first level of the roof. Let's see, entertainment. Saturday matinee at the theater.
Down in Wilmington.
11 cents.
Yeah.
Right? 11 cents. Got 2 features, plus all of the Buck Rogers or whoever would happen to be doing his thing that day. It was a pretty good bargain. Sometimes you went across the street, if you had some money, a few pennies, or actually really needed a nickel, you could go across the street to McLaughlin's drugstore, and if you were lucky, you might be able to get a soda. And once you got a little bit older, then you were allowed to go to the bowling alley, which was a couple of doors from the theater, and that was a great place too. And you could try to hit the pinboys, but that wasn't really the proper attitude. I mean, you were supposed to do that only by accident, not try to hit them. Let's see, entertainment. I guess that about covers that section.
Very good.
I just happened to think of something. I did all of my courting going to the little old library. At one time, it was a high school, and then they made it into the little library and used to be open a couple nights a week. And we'd go up there, and my husband lived in North Wilmington on High Street, and so he came down to walk down and then walk me to the library, and we sat close together. And we giggled and laughed, and finally, Miss Sheldon was an old maid, and she'd say, well, when you people will quiet down, it'll be all right. And then we'd do very well for a while until we'd get excited again. And then he walked me home, and that was my date.
Thank you all for sharing these memories. Your earliest memories of Wilmington are we have just a few very quick topics, if you could just share some of your thoughts on it. The Grange Hall was built in 1911, you know?
When we were in high school, we went to the Grange Hall for all our receptions and our proms, and we used to have high school concerts there, and we had evening gowns, and it was the biggest thing in our life to have an evening gown and go up on the stage, and all the people that wanted to have problems, you know, would make out up in the balcony while we were doing our concerts. And about the theater, I just wanted to mention Currier's Market used to be up in Wilmington Square, and in the back of Currier's Market. And they instead of us buying candy for the movies, we'd go there and buy a nickel bag of chips and a sour pickle. And that was what we ate in the movies every week. And we'd go Saturday afternoons because they had cartoons, and then they had continuous stories from one week to the next. And as far as the lake, my father, if I had ever stepped near that lake, I would have been tarred and feathered. We weren't, were we, Ruth?
I wasn't over there.
No. And I used to ride over to Ruthie's on the streetcar. We used to play dolls all the time. We were cousins, seeing our grandmother. My mother was sisters, and we'd go to the streetcar and spend the day, and then her mother would have the car. She would be the one, Olive, and we'd all go to Lynn Beach for the day.
Nice.
To the beach. It was a big deal together.
When I lived on Church Street, the streetcar went right by, and my mother would go to Reuben because there was only perhaps one store here. I think at one time there was a Ginter's.
Yes.
A little bitty hole in the wall. But we used to go to either Reuben or Reading and get loaded up with groceries, and then the motorman would put them all on the lawn, and we'd go out and get them. And I can remember those open cars. They were such fun. You could slide along the seat, you know, and then the rain put down the curtain. It was really fun.
When Weinberg's came to town, it was the biggest deal going there.
And they used to,
Weinberg's department store. Big deal.
Another topic that was brought up was the black cat.
Cats.
Speaking of places you ought not go, huh?
They forgot Ann's Duck Farm.
Yeah.
Ann's
That's
Duck
right.
Farm was down on Main Street, down by the town park.
Ann's Duck Farm.
Ann's
Yeah.
Duck Farm. We didn't go there either.
Does anybody know anything about the black cat? I mean, was it during Prohibition?
Unbelievable.
Or was it...
Police were going there every night of the week.
there was everything there that one wanted.
I know.
Maybe quote you.
Floor shows, they had floor shows too.
Floor shows, really?
Places in Boston would close and people would come out to continue the revelries.
Really?
Oh, they want to know where the black cat was.
When I graduated, the Grange Hall burned down, and that had been the center of a lot of activity. We had Grange fairs, and a couple times a year, the farmers brought their vegetables, and they always had a dance, and that was quite an occasion. And I know we had to go to Thompson's Grove and for the dance floor, dance reception. Yeah, that's right.
Was that after the Grange burned?
Yes.
They rebuilt the Grange, though.
Oh, yes, but that was,
Grange burnt down in 1963.
Jerry, didn't they have an open-air dance floor at Silver Lake on the further side of the lake? Wasn't there an open-air dance hall up there?
Pardon me?
Wasn't there an open-air dance hall up the lake?
When I was in the first grade, there was a dance hall right in the lake where the town beach is today. It was a great big concrete slab. It was lighted.
Right.
And I remember the piano there, and your kids from the school could go up and play the piano. And Beatrice Sullivan Barry, I'm sure some of you know her, said that she used to sit in her mother's bedroom window and listen to the music coming across the lake, and she said it was absolutely beautiful. Paul Lynch's wife told me that they would go dancing there. And more recently, I was talking to Kathleen Scanlon, and she said that when she looked at the book that I put out on Silver Lake, and she said, of course, it doesn't mean much to me. My mother wouldn't let me go up there.
Right.
And then she says in the same story, of course, my father met my mother in a dance hall up there. And I think I guess the dance hall was a pretty swinging place too. And there was also at Milligan's Grove, it was an evangelist camp. It was a great, where the Pines is now, right at the Tewksbury line.
that was farther up, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah. And that was a pretty swinging place. You know, it was evangelists coming up for the summer, and once the lights went down, everything happened. It was quite a place. One memory I have as a schoolboy, when I graduated Wilmington High School in 1951, was May Day on the Common. And I think some of you will remember that, where every kid in the school system in Wilmington had to perform Virginia reels, dancing, the maypole, and you got there early in the morning and left in the afternoon. It was all over, and they crowned the May Queen.
Right.
And it was, I'm sure you people have more memories of it than I do, because it ended when the war began. There was no more May Day, and I think it's because of the Russians.
They used to have some kind of a fair on the Common, I remember, because when I was a little girl, they had a greased pig that everybody used to have to try to catch. I remember that very well.
We used to go to some place over in Grove Avenue, and there'd be a big balloon would go up once a year. Do you remember that? And then one year we looked forward to going there, and the damn thing burned up, so it never went up.
I'd like to, at this time, invite members of the audience, if they have questions or comments and they would like to add their memories of Wilmington in the past. We've set up a microphone, and if you would like to, just come up and speak into the microphone and perhaps share some of your memories or some questions that you might have for the panel. We have one. There's one.
I don't really think I need a microphone, but, I'm wondering two things. First of all, my memory of the Grange Hall is right in back of the library. Are we speaking of that? Because that's really only burned down in the 1960s.
When did it, it was built in 1911. When did it burn down?
It was about the 60s.
60s and 62.
Oh, no. No,
Yeah.
no. Yes.
The Oddfellows met there.
I was going to say I was married. That was
Carmen's Tannery. Jim, I'm going to let you answer that from North Wilmington.
My grandfather
Across
worked
from
there.
the Whitfield School. And someone had mentioned here that the odor, in fact, I think you did, the odor coming in from the tannery made us close the windows. Well, that was okay until we closed the windows and the furnaces didn't work quite well, and you ended up with carbon monoxide poisoning. So you had a choice. You could either die from carbon monoxide poisoning or from the sulfuric acid fumes from the tannery. There were some derogatory statements made by people who came to North Wilmington on the train from other areas. They said, you can tell Manchester by the sea, and you can tell North Wilmington by the stink. But one thing about the Harriman's Tannery was that it was an industry which employed a great number of people in the town. There was no industry here,
My
per se.
grandfather worked at the tannery.
They provided jobs.
Adele, my grandfather.
Caleb Harriman, as a matter of fact, was a graduate of the Massachusetts College of Pharmacy, which most people don't recognize. He was, in fact, a graduate pharmacist. He never practiced. He used what he had learned in the chemical industry, or chemical studies, to perfect some processes, one of which was how to make a bull hide supple. And bull hides in the past had been very stiff, they broke, they cracked. That tannery processed them so that they would become supple and malleable. That process was then bought by a company, I believe it was in Baltimore, or somewhere down that way. But we had some great places to play out there, even with the stink.
They used to have a truck that would pick up the men morning and night, take them up there.
I'd like to direct my question to Gerry, please. Yes. When these people came out from Charlestown by train, where did they stop?
It was a station at Silver Lake.
It was at Silver Lake Station?
It was at the end of Wild Street. Streetcar. It runs right down. It also come up by streetcar. The tracks are still on the street, but I don't remember the cars. They came up Eastern Mass on the bus, or if they missed the train that went to the lake, they'd get off the center and walk up. And
They had that many
there weren't that many pardon me?
They had that many people wanting to come to Silver Lake?
I'd say 2,000 people arrived in one day. And all you have to do is just look at an old map and see the concentration of the houses that are up there. And it still pretty much exists today, and they just filled in all the empty lots. I'd like to make a point. The house lot that I lived in was 60 by 100.
Packed in there, huh?
Packed in.
You're packed in.
The 50-foot lots.
50-foot lot.
Yeah.
But they're all happy people. And no doors are locked.
I wonder if someone could answer this question for me. I don't know who. In back of the health center, I understand the tracks went there. What?
Salem and Lowell Railroad.
That was that was B&M, and it was from Lowell to Salem. The tracks were torn up, I don't remember the date, but I know that we climbed on the freight cars frequently to see how we could get inside the car, in through open cars to wander around just for the fun of it. And as I said, when they tore up those tracks, of course, they tore up the bridge which crosses Martin's Brook. And prior to that time, we could always just walk straight down the tracks. but that all
When
changed.
when I was going to normal school, we'd go to North Wilmington to Brown's Cross and pull that signal down so the train would stop for us to take us to Salem, and the same at night.
What year was that, Helen? Do you remember the years that you went to college down there in Salem?
It was 20.
In the 20s? I think
25, 24.
25.
Huh?
We graduated in 25.
Well, 25, 26.
Okay, because I think some of the last trains that ran through there brought the materials for building the Browns Crossing pumping station. And then, after that, like in 1927 or 8, I think the last trains ran through, right?
No, it was later than that.
Was it really?
A little bit later, but not much. Because I was there.
You remember that?
I probably wasn't supposed to be there, but I was there. One thing, if no one else is, one thing that I'd like to mention was the deliveries of materials such as bakery goods. Cushman, we waited for Cushman's bakery truck to arrive so I could have brownies, whatever. Also, the milk trucks, they delivered milk in bottles, and you had cream on top.
And orange juice?
And they, well,
No, they
they
didn't
didn't
have
deliver all
orange
those
juice.
things. No, just milk.
Just milk.
Just milk. And it took me 2 weeks. Well, we normally had gotten milk, I suppose, from Daly's farm or somewhere like that, or from the farm, which we called 107, or from my grandfather's. But we decided, or my father or mother decided, that we were going to get milk from Hood's, which they delivered to the door. But their milk was pasteurized. It took me 2 weeks to get used to that strange taste. Pasteurized milk. It just didn't taste right. It was very strange. The ice truck, you know, when the ice truck came, you put up the little sign, then you
Yes, in
turned
the
it and
window,
wanted
right.
25 pounds or 15 pounds or whatever. You turned the little sign in the window and he dropped off the ice and you stuck it in the ice box.
That's right.
But when we first went to Andover Street, it was interesting, the fact that we had a pump in the kitchen sink. There was no town water coming to our house. We pumped the water into the sink. We had a pretty fancy outhouse, Gerry, okay? Yeah. It was attached to the chicken house, and it was all enclosed. And it was pretty fancy, let me tell you. So you had the pigs out back, and the chickens in the chicken house, and the old barn fell down, we pulled it apart. Oh, well.
Are there any other questions or comments from the audience?
Does anyone have any recollection of the airport over near Billerica?
Yes, I remember that.
Well, yes. In fact, I just gave a whole bunch of pictures to Paul Schaffler. And the house my father built right next to me now, we could go upstairs there in those days and see the planes landing there. And that's, you know, everything seems to have grown up. And Noreen Markey's husband used to fly into there, Billerica Airways.
That was her first date with Leo.
Oh! Yeah.
What was the name of the airport?
Billerica Wilmington Airways. And after the war, they had training flights there. I had the pictures with the Army planes in there, you know. And gradually the thing disappeared.
Any other questions? Yes.
I'm a newcomer that came in 1956 and lived in East Wilmington when Lucci's store was just a little country store sitting right on Route 129. I mean, literally, the front steps were on 129. But one of the things that I remember was what we called Death Bridge.
Yes.
Anyone care to comment on that? That was prior to Route 93?
Death Bridge.
It connects, it's on 129, and it's, as you go, well, past the Mobile station, and you keep going towards Reading, and you go up over the top.
Okay.
That used to be Death Bridge.
But it was almost a 90-degree turn there.
Right.
And that's why they had so many accidents.
Right.
The cars never made the turn.
Oh, going over the bridge?
Going over, well,
Yeah.
The bridge was a
into a
railroad
road
bridge.
now, but it was
That's right.
Railroad.
Yeah.
right.
But I don't know who's got any pictures of that.
We used to have a meat man that came around and a fish man that delivered.
A meat man and a fish man that would
Yes,
come
they
and deliver
delivered
at
to the house. And I can remember gypsies coming in the summer. And my grandmother would make me come in the house. They used to sell their things. They would come up from Florida, and they would have their outdoor furniture on the back of their truck. And they would always come and try and sell you something. And then we had a rag man that used to come out from Boston somewhere, and he put 2 of his children through college. They were doctors, and he collected the rags and the papers. And he used to come every summer and collect.
There was a scissors grinder, too, or a night sharpener that went house to house. I can remember in the 50s. And you could get your laundry taken away and brought back to the door. That was when we only had one car.
Right.
And we were stuck out in the country.
I want to thank everyone. I'm getting a little signal here that,
I
you know,
just
this
say one
evening
thing,
has
please?
gone.
I think we would be remiss if we didn't mention Mayor Judge Spanos tonight.
That's true.
I really do, because he did wonderful things for our boys during the war.
Do you remember?
And-
Let's just take a minute and talk about Mayor Spanos.
Helen will talk about it.
Okay, Helen?
Well, I just remember that he had a store and he was awful good to the boys in the
Yes.
service. He gave them coffee and anything they needed.
He had everything
Very good.
to
Yeah.
every person that was in the service.
I'd like to talk about George.
Yes.
I met George when I was in the 6th grade. He had a little store right at the edge of the common.
Yes.
That's right.
And then he moved up to the center. And if you were a high school athlete or you were in the service, you didn't have to pay. And if you're one of his special people, he'd make you a hamburger, and you go like this, you could hear it in the back room, making the hamburger. And people came from everywhere to visit George. He was an absolute wonderful person. He was kind of cranky at times, but if you needed a buck, you could always go see, hey, George, give me a buck, I'll give it back to you later on. And he took care of everyone. And I think Mr. Chai could verify this here, is that he pretty much was a sponsor of the Silver Skates with the Backman family. And that he organized the train rides into Boston. And a special train would come out of Boston, stop in Wilmington, fill the whole train, and go in town for the Silver Skates Derby, which was held in the Garden. And George was up front all the time. And he went to every ball game that I ever played in, and he gave me a stick of gum. I didn't chew gum. But I think the people who knew George would have nothing but good words for him. He was quite a person. I guess they call him the mayor of
Mayor of Wilmington, right.
He had that wonderful, wonderful collection of photos of all the servicemen.
His home, I think, was right where the Baptist church is now. That's where he lived.
He gave a lot to this town.
I think
He really
that's where he
did.
lived.
Was his
Thank you for bringing that.
this property where he lived, right at the Baptist church?
Which one?
George, the first one, before he moved up to Main
It was right
Street.
on the corner of the
Of the corner.
There's a red house there now.
Oh,
It's right on the school side.
okay, near the Swain School. That corner, that red house,
Yeah.
that's where it
And
was.
Ethia's, Mrs. Ethia and Mrs. Russell took over the store to run it after that.
I'm glad you brought his name
When
up
was that?
because he deserves a lot of, yeah, really.
Really funnies.
We could spend, as we have, days here almost talking about these many topics. This time has just flown by. It's been incredible. I really want to thank every member of the panel for coming this evening and sharing your memories with us. It was just wonderful to hear and to have you here. And I hope that this is the beginning of several of these kinds of programs, because we have such a rich history in Wilmington. It's just wonderful to talk about. So again, thank you all, and thank the audience, and I would like to reintroduce Karen.
I'd also like to add my thanks to this panel who shared with such warmth and honesty their recollections of Wilmington, and it's really brought it home to us in a way to make us all proud of our home, I think. I think we could rename the program Times Gone By and Tears in My Eye for all the humor that was introduced. Didn't realize we were going to just have so much fun with it, too. I really appreciate all your sharing. I think it was really wonderful. I'd like to once again invite everybody to share some Baldwin apple pie and to stay, and I could probably guess that we could get people to stay and chat for a while if people are interested. We have a lot of warm pies came in this afternoon to the hospitality group, so I hope you'll stay and enjoy. We have a lot of pie. Once again, our membership table is outside, and I'd like to ask once again for anybody who's interested in helping support the library to continue more programming like this, to join the Friends of the Library. Adele Passmore has compiled a history of Wilmington, and she has donated 6 copies of her book to the first 6 people that sign up as patrons of the Friends of the Library, which is a $50 donation. The donations will come right back to helping the library in whatever ways the Friends see needs for improving the library. Thank you all very much for coming, and please enjoy our hospitality. Thank you.